Is this how you treat someone who just wants to listen, while coffee pours behind a diner counter and a flag rope clicks at the gate?
They mocked him gently, pressed him with rules, stand aside, and he didn't answer, not even when the crowd shifted and sighed. Then a worn ID edge caught the light. The air went still, a heartbeat counted once, and silence did what shouting never could. But quiet men leave echoes too, and that card never raised would open something no gate was meant to close. The security gate stood at the edge of the community grounds like a polite warning. Metal barriers, a laminated sign zip-tied to the fence, a small table where a clipboard rested in the sun. Nothing dramatic, just enough to say who belonged and who did not. He joined the line without looking at the sign. The choir's warm-up drifted from inside the grounds, voices rising and falling, like they had done for decades in towns like this. Somewhere deeper in a microphone popped once, then settled. Folding chairs scraped against concrete. Life preparing itself. He waited his turn. When he reached the front, the guard looked up and paused. The man was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. His jacket had seen better years. Not dirty, just tired. His boots were clean but worn down at the heel as if they'd carried more weight than most. "Sir," the guard said, lifting one hand, "this gate is for registered guests." The man stopped. Security stopped him at the gate. He nodded once, slow and respectful, the way men did when they understood instructions without needing them repeated. "I'm just here to listen," he said. His voice was steady, soft, the kind of voice that never rushed a sentence. "I won't be in the way." The guard shook his head. "Rules are rules." Behind the guard, a banner flapped against the fence. The breeze carried the smell of coffee from a diner across the street. Someone laughed inside the grounds, the sound bright and brief. The man glanced down, then back up. His hand slid toward his jacket pocket and stopped halfway. Inside the pocket was his wallet. Inside the wallet was an ID card. Not new, not crisp. The edges were rounded from years of being taken out and put back in. The seal had faded just enough to show it had earned its age. He didn't reach for it. "I understand," he said instead. The guard hesitated. "If you're not on the list, I'll need you to step aside." "Yes, sir." He stepped aside. A young volunteer standing nearby watched him move. She held a clipboard against her chest, the sun bleaching the paper at the edges. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll wait." She nodded, then hesitated. "You know, if you have identification, sometimes they make exceptions." He smiled, faint and polite, like someone acknowledging a kindness without accepting it. "I do," he said, "but you're not going to show it." "No." She searched his face for a reason. He didn't offer one. From where he stood, he could see the diner clearly now. A waitress leaned across a table, topping off a cup without asking. The customer didn't even look up, just slid the cup closer, grateful and ordinary. "That place still does refills," he said almost to himself. The volunteer smiled. "They always have." He crossed the street, bought a coffee he didn't really need, and left a tip that made the waitress pause. He didn't drink it, just held the warmth as he walked back. Security watched him return but said nothing. When he reached for his wallet to tuck it back into his pocket, the volunteer caught a glimpse of the corner of the card. Just a sliver. Plastic worn smooth. Then it was gone again. "That your ID?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "You could show them," she said gently. "It might help." He shook his head. "Some doors aren't meant to open that way." The guard nearby muttered to another, If he had proof, this'd be easier. He heard it. So did the volunteer. Proof. He had proof. He'd carried it for years. He just wasn't using it today. The sun climbed higher. The choir stopped warming up. Someone tapped the microphone again, twice this time. He stood where security had placed him, hands folded, eyes calm. Not pushed, not forced, just held in place by procedure. No one raised their voice. No one argued. The gate stayed closed. The ID stayed hidden. He could have shown it. He chose not to. They asked him to wait off to the side near the fence where the shadow cut a narrow line across the pavement. He didn't argue. He thanked them. The line at the gate moved on without him. Names were checked. Wristbands were handed out. People stepped through with the easy confidence of those who knew they belonged. He stood where they'd pointed, holding his coffee with both hands until it cooled. A few minutes passed before the young volunteer came back. She was still clutching her clipboard, though now it hung looser, like she'd decided no one was grading her anymore. "They'll start letting people in soon," she said, as if that might help. "That's all right," he replied. "I'm not in a hurry." She shifted her weight. "You're really okay standing here?" "Yes, ma'am." She glanced at his hands, then at his jacket. "You said you have an ID." "I do, and you're sure you don't want to show it?" "I'm sure." She let out a small breath. "You're the calmest person I've seen all morning." He smiled. "I've had practice." She laughed softly at that, then caught herself. "Sorry." "No need," he said. It was meant kindly. They stood together for a moment, watching the gate. "Can I ask something?" she said. "You just did," he answered. She smiled again. "Why come all this way if you're not going in?" He looked toward the grounds where the choir director was now waving people into place. "Sometimes listening from the outside is enough." She followed his gaze. "You don't sound bitter." "I'm not." "That's rare." He shrugged. "So is being noticed." A breeze kicked up, lifting the edge of his jacket. When he reached to smooth it back down, the wallet inside shifted. The volunteer's eyes caught the movement. Just a flash. A corner of plastic. A faded stripe of blue and gold. "That your identification?" she asked, more curious than insistent. "Yes, ma'am. It looks official." "It was," he said, then corrected himself. "It still is." She waited for more. None came. "May I see it?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "I'd rather not." "Are you worried they'll take it?" "No." "Then why?" "Because it isn't a key," he said. "And I don't want it treated like one." She studied him, trying to match his words to the card she'd barely seen. "It's not just a library card, is it?" He smiled, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "No, ma'am." She let the question drop. Across the street, the diner door swung open and closed. A bell chimed each time. A waitress stepped out to wipe a table near the window, then went back in. He watched her return with a pot of coffee, topping off a cup without being asked. The customer nodded, already reaching for his wallet. He crossed the street before he could talk himself out of it. Inside, the diner smelled like toast and hot grease. Familiar. Comforting. The waitress recognized him from earlier. "Back so soon?" she asked. "I won't stay," he said. "Just wanted to say hello." She smiled. "Coffee's still hot." "I know." He placed a few bills on the counter. "For the refills." She frowned. "You didn't order anything." "I know." She started to protest, then stopped. Well, thank you. He nodded and stepped back outside. When he returned to the gate, the volunteer noticed immediately. You didn't even sit down, she said. I got what I needed. He handed the coffee to a man waiting nearby, who looked surprised but grateful. That's kind of you, the volunteer said. He shook his head. Just passing it along. As he slipped his wallet back into his pocket, the edge of the card showed again. This time long enough for her to see more. A photo. A seal. Letters worn thin, but still legible. That's not just an old card, she said quietly. He looked at her, then away. No, he agreed. That wasn't just an old card. The colonel arrived without ceremony. No announcement, no entourage. Just a man in a pressed jacket moving along the edge of the grounds, greeting a few familiar faces, with nods that didn't ask for attention. He walked the way people did when they knew the place, and the place knew them back. As he passed the gate, something slowed him. Not the line, not the paperwork. The man standing off to the side. The older fellow wasn't restless. He wasn't trying to catch anyone's eye. He stood straight, weight balanced, hands relaxed at his sides, as if waiting were a choice he'd made and not an instruction he'd been given. The colonel watched for a moment. Security spoke to the man again, this time with the practiced patience of someone repeating a policy they believed in. The man listened, nodded, said very little. He didn't explain himself. That was the part that didn't fit. The colonel took a few steps closer, pretending to read the sign posted on the fence. From there, he could see the man more clearly. The posture, the stillness, the way his eyes stayed level, not drifting to the gate, not scanning the crowd. You waiting on someone, the colonel asked, casual, as if striking up conversation in a grocery line. Yes, sir, the man said. Inside, no, sir. The colonel raised an eyebrow. Then what brings you here? The man considered the question. The music, he said. And the people. That's all, that's enough. The colonel studied him. They ask you for identification. Yes, sir. And you didn't show it. No, sir. The answer came without tension. No edge. No apology. The colonel smiled faintly. Most folks reach for their wallet before the sentence is finished. The man returned the smile. I've noticed. Why didn't you? The man looked past the colonel toward the diner across the street where a waitress leaned out to shake a rug. Didn't seem right. Right for whom? For me. Security shifted nearby, glancing over, unsure whether to interrupt. The colonel waved them off. Give us a moment. They stepped back. The colonel lowered his voice. May I ask what you did for a living? The man paused. I worked with my hands. That's not what I meant. I know. The colonel waited. The man didn't continue. A breeze lifted the edge of the man's jacket. He reached up to smooth it down, a simple movement, practiced. As he did, the wallet inside shifted, opening just enough for the light to catch the corner of a card. Just a glimpse, plastic worn smooth. A seal pressed faint, but familiar. A photo set into the surface edges softened by time. The colonel's eyes flicked down, then back up. He didn't comment. Not yet. That card, the colonel said lightly. You carry it often. Yes, sir. And you'd rather not use it. That's right. The colonel nodded slowly. Most people think identification is about entry, and you don't. I think it's about responsibility, the colonel said, knowing when to present it. The man met his gaze. That's how I see it too. The colonel looked at the gate again. The volunteers, the guards, the clipboard, all of it working exactly as designed, and still something was off. The man standing there wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He wasn't trying to slip through. He was waiting. The colonel took a step back as if to leave, then stopped himself. He turned once more, eyes settling briefly on the man's pocket, where the wallet now rested flat again. That ID, the colonel said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. He took another step, then another, and finally paused. He looked back. That ID didn't belong where it was. The colonel turned back before he'd taken 3 steps. He didn't hurry. He didn't call out. He simply changed direction, as if he'd remembered something he'd left behind. "Sir," he said, stopping an arm's length away. "May I speak with you again?" "Yes, sir," the man replied. The guards watched, uncertain. The volunteer stiffened, clutching her clipboard. No one said a word. The colonel's voice stayed low. "You said you had identification." "Yes, sir." "And you chose not to show it." "That's right." The colonel studied his face, not searching for guilt, looking for certainty. "Why come to the gate at all?" he asked. The man glanced toward the grounds. The choir had gone quiet, now waiting. Folding chairs sat empty and expectant. "I wanted to hear them from close enough," he said. "Didn't need to be inside to do that." The colonel nodded. "You understand you could have walked away?" "Yes, sir." "But you didn't." "No, sir." A pause settled between them. Not awkward. Measured. Security shifted again, one guard clearing his throat. The colonel raised a finger, and the sound died. "May I see the card?" the colonel asked gently this time. The man hesitated. "Not long. Just enough to matter." "I wasn't planning on using it," he said. "I understand," the colonel replied. "I'm not asking you to use it." The man reached for his wallet, then stopped himself. His hand hovered uncertain. At that moment, one of the guards stepped closer, meaning to intervene to remind them of procedure. The space tightened. He wasn't pushed by hands. He was pressed by protocol. As the man shifted his weight, the wallet slipped. Just a fraction. Enough. The ID slid into view. The colonel saw it clearly now. The seal, the photograph, the layout that never quite left your memory once you'd learned it. He didn't raise his voice, didn't call anyone over. He reached out not to take it, but to steady the wallet as the man tucked it back into place. "I see," the colonel said quietly. The words were simple, but the room around them seemed to change shape. The colonel straightened his posture, settling into something more formal, more exact, not rigid, intentional. He turned to the nearest guard. "You may open the gate." The guard blinked. "Sir." The colonel met his eyes. "Please." The guard stepped back without another word. Metal shifted. The barrier moved. The gate opened. No announcement followed. No explanation. Just space where there hadn't been space before. The volunteer's breath caught. Someone in line stopped mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to pause. The colonel handed the wallet back, this time fully carefully, with both hands. "Thank you for carrying that," he said, "and for knowing when not to lead with it." The man accepted the wallet, his hands steady. "Yes, sir." The colonel lowered his voice further. "I won't ask your name. I won't share what I saw." "I'd appreciate that," the man said. "I imagine you would." For a moment, they stood facing one another, two men measuring the same thing from opposite ends of experience. Then the colonel stepped aside. The man walked through the gate. He didn't look around, didn't search for faces. He simply moved forward unhurried as if he'd been expected all along. Behind him, security fell into a new stillness. Not stiff, respectful. The volunteer swallowed and smiled, unsure why she suddenly felt proud. No one clapped. No one spoke. The ID stayed hidden again, back where it belonged. But everything around it had already changed. The gate stayed open. At first, no one seemed to notice. People were still adjusting to the quiet that had settled where instructions usually lived. The guard who had moved the barrier stood with his hands at his sides, unsure whether to return to his post or remain exactly where he was. The man walked a few steps inside the grounds and stopped. Not because anyone told him to, because he always stopped before moving further than necessary. Behind him, the colonel remained near the gate. He did not follow. He did not hurry the moment along. He simply turned back to the small table where the clipboard rested and picked up the wallet the man had set there. He held it the way you held something that mattered. When he returned it, he did so with both hands. The man accepted it with a nod. "Thank you," the colonel said, for what the man asked. "For not making this harder than it needed to be." The man considered that. "It rarely helps to make things harder," he said. The colonel smiled just a little. Then he stepped back. There was no speech, no explanation offered to the line that had gathered again, quiet now in a different way. The guards did not announce a change in policy. They simply adjusted their stance, opening space where space had been denied. The volunteer watched it happen with wide eyes. She hadn't heard anything remarkable. No revelation. No official declaration. Yet something had shifted so clearly she could feel it in her chest. The next person in line stepped forward and was waved through without a word. Then another. Then another. No one rushed. No one questioned the change. They simply followed it. The man moved deeper into the grounds, choosing a seat near the edge where the chairs thinned out. From there, he could hear the choir clearly. He sat down, folding his jacket across his lap, and looked straight ahead. A woman a few rows up turned and glanced at him. She took in his posture, the calm way he settled, and then looked away again. Her shoulders relaxing, as if she'd decided something without realizing it. Nearby, two men who had been whispering stopped. One of them nodded toward the gate, then toward the man. The other nodded back slower, thoughtful. The volunteer finally exhaled. She walked over to the guard she'd spoken with earlier. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, just doing it right." She smiled at that. Across the street, the diner bell chimed again. A couple stepped out, coffee cups in hand, pausing to watch the crowd before walking on. The world didn't stop. It simply adjusted its angle. The colonel remained at the gate a moment longer, watching the flow settle into its new rhythm. When he was satisfied, he returned to his place inside, blending into the gathering like any other attendee. No one pointed him out. No one needed to. The man listened as the choir began again. The first note caught, then steadied. Voices layered on top of one another, familiar and patient. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not in relief, in recognition. Behind him, the line continued to move. The guards checked names when needed, and didn't when they didn't. Their shoulders stayed loose. Their voices stayed even. A few people looked back at the gate as they passed through, as if expecting it to close again. It didn't. The volunteer caught the man's eye from across the aisle and lifted her cup slightly in a quiet salute. He returned it with a nod. She didn't know why, but she felt like she'd witnessed something important. Not a rule being broken, a rule being understood. The man rested his hands on his knees, the wallet secure in his pocket. He didn't touch it again. He didn't need to. The gate stayed open. The library was quiet, in the way small-town libraries always were, even when people were inside. Sunlight fell through the tall front windows and landed on a corkboard near the entrance. Flyers overlapped there, bake sales, reading hours, lost pets, thank you notes, written in careful handwriting. A new card had been added overnight. It wasn't large, just a simple rectangle pinned straight, the ink dark and respectful. Thank you to the volunteer who helped yesterday. Your kindness was seen. No name, no explanation. A woman paused to read it, then smiled and moved on. A man adjusted his glasses, nodded once, and followed her. The card stayed where it was, doing its quiet work. Across town, a radio hummed in the background of the hardware store. The host cleared his throat between songs. Before we head into the next track, he said, I want to pass along a quiet thank you from the community. You know who you are, and we appreciate you. No applause followed. Just the soft click of the station fading back into music. That evening, the man sat on his porch as the sun lowered itself behind the rooftops. The porch swing creaked gently beneath him, keeping time with the breeze. Somewhere down the street, a screen door closed. A dog barked once, then settled. He rested his hands on the small table beside the swing. His wallet lay there open. The ID was visible now, no longer tucked away. The photo stared back at him, younger and sharper than the man holding it. The seal was still faded, the edges still worn. Nothing about it had changed. He picked it up, turned it once in his fingers, then set it back down. All those years it had been shown when it mattered and hidden when it didn't. It had opened doors and closed conversations. It had been recognized in rooms that didn't need to announce what they knew. That day at the gate, it hadn't needed to be shown. It had only needed to be carried. The gate had opened anyway. He leaned back, letting the swing move. The air cooled. The wind lifted the edge of the card, then let it rest again. Across the street, a neighbor waved from her porch. He lifted his hand in return. They didn't talk about the event. No one did. By morning, it would already be part of the town's quiet memory, filed away with other small moments that changed things without asking permission. He slipped the ID back into his wallet and closed it. Not because he needed to hide it, because it had done what it was meant to do. The radio drifted from an open window down the block. A familiar song played low, the kind people hummed without realizing it. He listened, rocking gently, content to be exactly where he was. Some doors were built to test who asked. Others opened when they recognized who waited. If this story moved you, share it forward. That evening, the porch swing moved slowly under the weight of cooling air, and the town settled into itself the way it always did after something quietly right had happened. Still, kindness doesn't always ask for recognition, and justice doesn't always arrive with raised voices. Sometimes it shows up like a lamp in a winter window, lit for no one in particular, yet impossible to miss. Then, without ceremony, the proof remained: a small note on a library board, a radio's quiet thank you, a gate that opened because it understood who was waiting. Quietly, the ID stayed in his wallet, the gate stayed open in memory, and what had been recognized that day no longer needed to be shown.